Morning, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Always like to give a few minutes so that people can log into Zoom. Sometimes we get logged out despite being on there quite a bit. So first off, want to say that we're super excited to have you here joining us today for this program covering the power of yet, really embracing the growth mindset during these uncertain times. I'm Thais Rodriguez Calles. I serve as a member of our Women United Advisory Group, and as well as our chair for our Leadership Programs Committee. So part of the group that's bringing this specific program to you guys today. We do have a great group, over 50 people on so far. I see some faces that are familiar and some names that are familiar and some that are new. Just want to touch on Women United really quick and then go into the agenda for today before we kick it off to our facilitator. So Women United is an affinity group of the United Way Suncoast, and we're a group of women. As you meet us and learn more about us, can tell that we have passion and energy to really establish a great network of women in the community to support each other and develop each other, but also to have very specific, intentional programs that support the community, including advocacy efforts. And so I've actually been a part of the group for about 2 years now and have really gotten to know so many great women and also been a part of so many programs that I see and feel and get reminded of over the years of the impact it's had. So look forward to seeing you all at future programs and being a part of the group. And you'll see some of us have backgrounds and we have Women United on our names. So feel free to reach out to any of us, separately if you have questions about the group. So moving on to the next slide of just our agenda for the day. So having a growth mindset, I think, is something that's always resonated with individuals, especially women. And I think it resonates even more now in this, unique environment that we're in. Personally, it's resonated with me because I've always been very passionate about making sure that I'm not only for myself, but supporting others, reach their full potential. And this goes a little hand in hand with that. But I also recognize that sometimes we're like, what exactly does that mean? And how exactly do I achieve it? And so that's what this program is really meant to do. It's really meant to share, a little bit more clarity on what's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And then also, how can I achieve that growth mindset? And so we're going to go through some of that with you all. We're going to have some breakout sessions so that we can bring it a little bit more personal and bring it home. And really with the goal that we all leave with that better understanding of what's that growth mindset. And then also, how can we start facilitating that in our personal lives? So really excited about the program and getting to know some of you guys and women throughout the program. And before kicking it off, to the next speaker, I do just want to remind everyone from a Zoom perspective, please use mute if you're not speaking. Please unmute if you are, because we've already, I know we all experienced that. And if you feel comfortable, join us on video, and then also use the chat and the reactions and all of that. I know some of us are in tune with that, or some of us use other tools. So I definitely want to make the most of the technology and the environment that we're in. I do want to hand it off now to Mallory Curtin, who is a Women United member as well, and also part of our Leadership Program Committee. And she's going to introduce our facilitator for today. Mallory?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Thais. Great job kicking it off and getting us all excited about the topic. Just to build on that a bit, I think during Thais was talking a lot about this concept and this topic really resonating with us. And I think also just during these unusual times, that one of the benefits that I've seen and that Thais and I were talking about so much as we developed this content was that there's just more time. At least one benefit has been that there's been more time for some self-reflection. And so really trying to build on that momentum and continuing with that self-reflection together as a group today, and thinking of how together we can work on our professional development during these uncertain times. So So thank you for joining us. We are excited to get this event started. I have the honor today of presenting our speaker, Erin. Erin Ritchie Carlson has been a friend of mine since high school. And so I've had the pleasure of knowing her for many years, and she's always been such a fantastic leader and advocate for women. As soon as we determined that the topic was going to be growth mindsets, Erin, it came to mind immediately. She has been someone that has not only helped people apply growth mindsets in their everyday lives, but she herself is a great example of this as well. She is the founder and primary consultant for ERC Strategies, which is her consulting firm, which is focused both on talent consulting and career development. And so on the talent consulting side, she really focuses on helping companies recruit top talent, develop top talent, and retain top talent. And then on the career development side, she helps leaders of those companies really focus in on how to fine tune their skill set and become the best leaders that they can be. So, so I'll now hand it over to Erin. Erin, thanks for joining us, and hope you all enjoy this event.
Thank you so much, Mallory. I am so excited to be with over 100 of you today. How amazing and incredible. Everybody waking up on an early Friday morning in the midst of what has, I'm sure, been a crazy and wild 2020 for all of us. So just thank you for being here today. Thank you for committing the time. And I'm just really excited for all of us to be a part of this collective growth that we're going to be talking about today in a fixed versus growth mindset. This is such a unique topic. I think a lot of us are going to really align with what we learned today, not only as business professionals, but as I know most of us on the call today are women, if not all of us. I think women, we really have to work to kind of engage and develop a growth mindset. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, how we can identify what our mindset is inherently, and what we can do, whether we have a natural growth mindset or not, what we can do to continue to grow and develop and improve that mindset. So we're going to watch a couple of videos to start, and I'm hoping that technology is going to be our friend here. We have tested this, so hopefully it's going to work. And if not, I will have somebody in the chat let me know. So we're going to kick off this first video right now.
What do you think is the key to achieving our goals, our success? Some people suggest things like hard work, focus, persistence. But research shows these are all byproducts of something else, something much more powerful that we can all develop. It is this very special something that really is critical to success, and is what I'm here to discuss with you today. Someone who has achieved great success is Josh Waitzkin, a chess international master and the subject of the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. Nobody has won all the national chess championships that Josh has. But even more impressive, when he turned 21, he took on the challenge of mastering something completely new and very different from chess: martial arts. He realized that he had learned how to grow and succeed, and he could apply that understanding to other domains. And so, he devoted himself relentlessly to Tai Chi Chuan. And after lots of hard work, many failures, and some broken joints, he became a great martial artist, and he won 2 world championships. Now he's off to jiu-jitsu. So what does Josh say is the greatest thing that ever happened to him? Believe it or not, he says, losing my first national chess championship, because it helped me avoid many of the psychological traps. The key trap that Josh avoided was believing that he was special, that he was smarter than other people, and that he didn't have to work hard. He could have thought of himself as a prodigy, but he doesn't think that he has extraordinary intelligence. He says, the moment we believe that success is determined by an ingrained level of ability, we will be brittle in the face of adversity. Josh often quotes Stanford professor Carol Dweck, who discovered that some people see intelligence or abilities as fixed, what is called a fixed mindset, while other people see them, as Josh does, as qualities that can be developed, a growth mindset. More important, Dr. Dweck discovered that these 2 different mindsets lead to very different behaviors and results. In a study she did with Dr. Lisa Blackwell, several hundred seventh graders were surveyed to determine which mindset each student had, and then they were tracked for 2 years. Results showed that the students with a growth mindset, those who thought they could change their own intelligence, increased their grades over time, while those with a fixed mindset did not. You can see the trend. The gap in performance just widens and widens over time. The difference between these two groups? A different perspective on intelligence. Other studies have shown similar effects for our mindset about other abilities, like problem solving, playing sports, managing people, or anything else you'd like. Dancing la Macarena. The key to success is not simply effort or focus or resilience, but it is the growth mindset that creates them. The mindset itself is critical. Research shows that when we directly try to build grit or persistence, it is not nearly as effective as addressing the mindset that underlies them. How many of us think of ourselves as not math people, or creative, or sociable, or athletic, or conversely, that we're naturals? If we're to fulfill our potential, we have to start thinking differently. We have to realize that we're not chained to our current capabilities. Neuroscience shows that the brain is very malleable, and we can change our own ability to think and to perform. In fact, many of the most accomplished people of our era were thought of by experts to have no future. People like Charles Darwin, Lucille Ball, Marcel Proust, and many others. But they, along with all great achievers, from Mozart to Einstein, built their abilities. But the key insight that I would like you to walk away with today is that when we realize that we can change our own abilities, when we have a growth mindset, we bring our game to new levels. So how does a growth mindset do that? It turns out that there are physiological manifestations to mindset. Brain scans show that for people with a fixed mindset, the brain becomes most active when receiving information about how the person performed, such as a grade or a score. But for people with a growth mindset, the brain becomes most active when receiving information about what they could do better next time. In other words, people with a fixed mindset worry the most about how they're judged, while those with a growth mindset focus the most on learning. There are other consequences of mindset. People with a fixed mindset see effort as a bad thing, something that only people with low capabilities need, while those with a growth mindset see effort as what makes us smart, as the way to grow. And when they hit a setback or failure, people with a fixed mindset tend to conclude that they're incapable. So to protect their ego, they lose interest or withdraw. We observe that as lack of motivation, but behind it is a fixed mindset. Whereas people with a growth mindset understand that setbacks are part of growth. So when they hit one, they find a way around it, like Josh Waitzkin did when he lost in chess or in martial arts. Research clearly shows these effects of mindset. In one study that Dr. Dweck did with Dr. Claudia Mueller, they had children do a set of puzzles. And then they praised the kids. To some of the kids, they said, "Wow, that's a really good score. You must be smart at this." That's fixed mindset praise because it portrays intelligence or abilities as a fixed quality. To other kids, they said, "Wow, that's a really good score. You must have tried really hard." That's growth mindset praise because it focuses on the process. Then they asked the kids, "Okay, what kind of puzzle would you like to do next? An easy one or a hard one?" The majority of the kids who received the fixed mindset praise chose to do the easy puzzle, while the great majority of those who received the growth mindset praise chose to challenge themselves. Then the researchers gave a hard puzzle to all of the kids because they were interested in seeing what confronting difficulty would do to their performance. Look at what happened when the kids later went back to the set of easier problems that they started with. The kids who received the fixed mindset praise did significantly worse than they had originally, while those who received the growth mindset praise did better. And to top it off, at the very end, kids were asked to report their scores. And the kids who received the fixed mindset praise lied about their scores over 3 times more often than those who received the growth mindset praise. They did not have another way to cope with their failure. The difference between these two groups? One short little sentence. How often do we praise kids for being smart or for being great at something? We've been told that this will raise their self-esteem, but instead, It puts them in a fixed mindset. They become afraid of challenges and they lose confidence when things get hard. As Josh Waitzkin says, it is incredibly important for parents to make their feedback process related, as opposed to praising or criticizing talent. If we win because we're a winner, then when we lose, it must make us a loser. These studies show not only the mechanisms by which mindset affects performance, but they also show something else that's very important. They show that we can change mindsets. And that's important because most of us have fixed mindsets about something. Another study that showed that we can change mindsets is one in which Dweck and Blackwell did a workshop with 7th graders to instill a growth mindset in them. As a result of the workshop, the students gained more interest in learning and they worked harder. And as a result of that, their grades improved. Other studies have shown that when we teach a growth mindset, not only does it improve achievement for students as a whole, but it also narrows the achievement gap because the effects are most pronounced for the students who face negative stereotypes, such as minority students and girls in math. I've spoken mostly about children, but mindset affects all of us. In our workplaces, managers with fixed mindsets don't welcome feedback as much, and they don't mentor employees as much. And employees with growth mindsets about specific skills like negotiations become far better at those skills than people with fixed views. Mindsets can even help us solve big social issues. A recent study showed that when we expose Israelis and Palestinians to the idea that groups can change, they increase their attitudes toward one another, they improve them, and they enhance their willingness to compromise and to work for peace. We also see the effects of mindsets on relationships, sports, health. How is it possible that as a society, we're not asking schools to develop a growth mindset in children? Our myopic efforts to teach them facts, concepts, and even critical thinking skills is likely to fail if we don't also deliberately teach them the essential beliefs that will allow them to succeed, not only in school, but also beyond. There's a lot that we can do to change mindsets, but here are 3 things that any of us can do to instill a growth mindset in ourselves and in those around us. First, recognize that the growth mindset is not only beneficial, but it's also supported by science. Neuroscience shows that the brain changes and becomes more capable when we work hard to improve ourselves. Second, learn and teach others about how to develop our abilities. Learn about deliberate practice and what makes for effective effort. When we understand how to develop our abilities, we strengthen our conviction that we're in charge of them. And third, listen for your fixed mindset voice. And when you hear it, talk back with a growth mindset voice. If you hear, I can't do it, add, yet. My request to you today is that you share this knowledge about the growth mindset with your family, friends, and schools, so that all of us can go and fulfill our potential. Thank you.
Well, if you're anything like me, your mind was maybe a little blown by that video. I'm seeing some awesome comments in the chat box around how much you enjoyed that video and what it was sharing. And I think part of why it's so sort of we have such an epiphany moment when we listen to that is that it really kind of goes against everything we've been taught since we were little, right? And how we praise. I've seen several of you mention in the chat box that this already, as you're thinking of this concept, is changing how you might give feedback to and praise and praise your kids. And so I just think that's great that we're already hearing it. And we've got a lot more that we're going to discuss today that I think is going to help us get there. We're going to go to the next slide here, hopefully. There we go. So, I thought the speaker did such a great job of sharing anecdotes to help us understand fixed versus growth mindset. And so I wanted to share a little story and anecdote from my experiences that as we were preparing for this presentation just came top of mind to me as I thought about an area early in life where I recognized the opportunity to change my mindset from fixed to growth. And I'm sure we all have memorable stories from childhood that just kind of stay ingrained in our brains and kind of carry us through life. And one of those stories for me was the story of how I learned to ride a bike. Part of the reason this memory is so vivid is because of the environment. It was during a really fun family beach vacation when I was younger, probably about 5 or 6 years old. And we vacationed regularly with other families growing up. And so this happened to be a trip where we were going with several other families, all with kids around the same age. And it was the year of the bike. I'm sure we can all remember that stage. And maybe some of you, even with your kids now or recently, you just have that year where everybody's learning and everybody's jumping on and learning how to ride a bike. And so everyone brought their bikes. A lot of the other kids had been practicing prior to vacation. So several of them were already on it and just riding like the wind down the beach. And it was kind of my first time learning. So I was really excited on the outset of this experience. I wanted to join the pack of the other kids that were riding the bike. And I was ready to do it. I had all kinds of confidence. I was watching them. They could do it. I could do it too. Unfortunately, my first attempt at getting going and being pushed off ended in a nasty tumble, and my first badge of courage scar, as my mom likes to call it, which I actually still have today on my left knee. And needless to say, I was really discouraged, right? And I think a lot of us can relate to this idea. You fail, something happens where it doesn't go the way you expect. You see others around you that are doing it and succeeding. You're comparing, and all of a sudden, the mind frame and the self-talk becomes, I can't do it. I'm not good at riding a bike. Other people are better than me. I'm just going to throw in the towel. I was living in a fixed mindset. I saw the other kids doing better. I had failed, and I immediately connected my ability to the failure that I had experienced and concluded that I just wasn't going to be able to ride a bike. Well, thankfully, my mom came over and gave me a great pep talk. And instead of telling me just simply, yes, you can, she said, yes, you can, but you just need to practice more. And this light bulb went off that it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't good enough or that I couldn't ride the bike. It was just that I hadn't had enough practice. Think about it. All the other kids that were there prior had had many weeks leading up where they had already practiced riding the bike. So it was new to me. I just needed to put more effort and more practice to get better. So after a little bit of coaxing and self-talk, I came over my fears, kept practicing. And by the end of the week, I was a master bike rider, just like all of the other kids in the group. The key in this shift is that I changed my mindset, and then I reframed my mindset into action. And that's a really key part that I think is important when we're understanding this research by Carol Dweck. We're going to watch another video in a minute to share. It's not just the mindset shift. The mindset shift is definitely a big part, and one that I think a lot of us have to overcome, and that hurdle. But it's then taking that shift in mindset and putting it into action, which usually means putting more effort and more practice. So it's not just a belief in I can do it, it's a belief that you can improve. And so I think this quote just sort of perfectly identifies that first piece of this. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right. So we're going to watch another video here really quickly that summarizes some additional points before we jump into learning more about fixed versus growth mindset.
Researcher and professor Carol Dweck uses the term mindset to describe the way people think about ability and talent. Dweck delineates between two different mindsets that exist on a continuum. The first is the fixed mindset, which suggests that your abilities are innate and unchangeable. The second is a growth mindset, which views it as something you can improve through practice. In a fixed mindset, you view failure as permanent, but with a growth mindset, you see failure as a chance to learn and even pivot. Those with a fixed mindset are more likely to view critical feedback as a personal attack, while those with a growth mindset will see it as a chance to improve, where they can develop new systems. With a fixed mindset, you're more likely to choose easier tasks and put in minimal effort. After all, if talent is fixed, why bother improving? Why even try? But with a growth mindset, you're more likely to embrace challenging tasks and work hard to improve. Those with a fixed mindset are likely to give up when they face an obstacle. Meanwhile, those with a growth mindset will view obstacles as a chance to experiment and solve problems. In a fixed mindset, the focus is on measurable accomplishments. But with a growth mindset, the focus is more on a journey of continual improvement. With a fixed mindset, you're less likely to take creative risks. But with a growth mindset, creative risks are simply a way to innovate and improve. Ultimately, your mindset influences everything from creative risk-taking to how you view feedback to whether or not you finish difficult tasks. And in the end, it's one of the greatest factors in determining whether or not you grow and improve in your abilities.
So what great news. Hopefully we hear the great news from this, in that a quote that Carol Dweck shares in her book is that talent isn't passed down in the genes, it's passed down in the mindset. So to me, this was really comforting and made me feel empowered to know that we're not static, right? The way that we are from an intelligence perspective, or what we know or what we've learned, isn't static to where we are just because of our DNA. It really starts with our mindset, right? And that shift into action, which I think is so important. So let's just go over what we heard in the last short video related to a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset, and we can see as we look in these gray thought bubbles, right? This is sort of the place that we're in when we're in a space of a fixed mindset. And I can say that my natural affinity is to move towards a fixed mindset. So I have to actively work. I've seen a lot of you in the chat box mention it takes a lot of effort to really kind of unlearn the fixed mindset and to go into a growth mindset. And I am with you. It's not a natural approach. The fixed mindset is a more natural approach because of how we've been taught, right? But this fixed mindset is the idea or the belief that your qualities are carved in stone. It creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. You're constantly trying to demonstrate your skills and your intelligence and your ability versus demonstrating what you've learned and how you can grow. So typically, if you're in a fixed mindset, when you're faced with challenges, you try to avoid them, right? You tend to, in the midst of obstacles, give up early. So the idea of persistence doesn't feel good to you. It feels like you're failing. And so the idea of persisting to overcome is not a natural quality in a fixed mindset. When you're faced with feedback, you tend to ignore it or become defensive in feedback. How many of us have ever been there, right? I can certainly speak for that. The idea that the feedback is an opportunity for growth and development sometimes can naturally feel like it's just criticizing our ability, right? And if we're in that fixed mindset, what it's criticizing is my skill. And if I believe that intelligence is static, then I can't overcome it. So of course we would be defensive if we're in a fixed mindset when we get feedback. The other thing I think that's difficult here is, if we're really honest with ourselves, we can feel threatened by the success of others. That's a tough thing to admit, but in a fixed mindset, I think especially when we think about the importance of women supporting women in business and professional occupations, that becomes so important, but it also can feel competitive and feel like it could be a threat instead of an opportunity to learn and grow. So fixed mindset feels kind of yucky. If you're kind of feeling that, sort of rumbling in your gut and maybe going, yeah, that's me. That's normal, because I think most of us inherently end up falling in this space because societally how we train and develop ourselves. So in a growth mindset, which again, remember, this is great news. We can develop a growth mindset. This really is flipping everything on the axis to the other side. Intelligence is not static. It can be developed. And instead of developing your talent, you're developing your skills over time. You're improving your ability. It's not fixed, right? Those that are in a growth mindset, some ways that you might identify them is they embrace challenge. So the thought of being in a challenging environment actually motivates them. They're excited by it. Have you ever met someone who just loves the idea of a challenge or overcoming something, and you kind of think maybe something's a little off, right, with them? It's just that they're growth mindset people. So it's really attractive. They are persistent in the face of obstacles. I think persistence is such a great word for people in this concept of growth mindset. They don't give up easily. And here's the deal that I think is really important. There are many examples of this in the book, and some of you have mentioned that you've read the book in the chat, which I love. They use a lot of examples, sports figures like Michael Jordan and the infamous quote that Michael Jordan has talked about, how many free throws he's missed versus the ones that he's made, how many times he's failed. I think that's a great example of a growth mindset. It doesn't mean that you fail less in growth mindset. Quite frankly, you probably fail more because you don't give up. But the key is that over time, you develop a better approach and you get better because you are not afraid to fail. And I think part of what gets scary about the idea of a growth mindset is that there's vulnerability involved in that. It's identifying that we're not good at it yet and how can we get better. And usually getting better means that we have to be prepared for failure. The other piece of a growth mindset person is they learn from feedback. They actually crave feedback. They want more of it, whether it's constructive or maybe even kind of harsh and direct. They look at it as an opportunity to use it to grow and become better. They find lessons and inspiration from the success of other people, so they don't feel threatened by other people's successes and what they've achieved and accomplished. People with a growth mindset believe that your qualities are carved in stone, then fixed mindset creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. It's not about immediate perfection. It's about learning something over time. Great stuff, right? I love it. I wish I could read all the comments, but I can't see them right now. We'll go back to them in a few minutes. So fixed versus growth mindset. These are some quotes that you might hear in your brain if you're on the fixed side versus on the growth side. On the fixed side, you might say, I doubt my ability. On the growth side, you might say, I need to improve. On the fixed side, you may identify with the idea that anxiety undermines performance. So, on the growth side, focusing on making progress. It's not about your performance. It's about the ability to develop and make progress. In fixed mindset, you might feel helpless, right? You might feel like there isn't anything I can do to improve or get better. This is just who I am. I know a lot of, unfortunately, I think there's a kind of a bad trend with, or at least when I was growing up, that a lot of girls, or at least I identified that I'm a girl, I'm not good at math. I don't know if anybody else could identify with that. And instead of it being about, well, my mindset isn't strong enough, or I don't have the ability to be good at math, how can I take that negative emotion and use it as fuel to get better and practice more? The other element of fixed versus growth mindset is avoidance. So fixed mindset tend to be more avoiders. They don't want to experience the challenge. They avoid persistency. They avoid challenge. Whereas the growth mindset runs after it head on, right? So the idea ultimately, I think, to stick with you based on the videos we watched earlier is fixed is I can't do it. Growth is I can't do it yet. I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways from what we're talking about today. I can't do it yet, right? There was some really interesting information and research, and if you get a chance to read the book, I think it's just really fascinating. If any of you are out there in leadership roles in your profession or on boards or a part of community organizations where you're in a leadership capacity, fixed versus growth mindset in leaders is a really fascinating topic, and a lot of research has been done. They give several examples of leaders in different industries that were fixed versus growth mindset. Those fixed mindset leaders tended to drain intelligence and capability out of the people around them. Their focus was on their intelligence and defending their worth. Again, this idea of kind of defensiveness or dukes up or just kind of having this wall up. They needed to be the smartest, and they also needed everybody around them to feed them the intelligence that made them look good, right? As opposed to a growth mindset leader, these leaders tend to use their intelligence in a fundamentally different way. They amplify the smarts and capability of people around them. People get better and smarter in their presence. They're willing to give credit to people. They're willing to grow as a group instead of an individual. And so, I think with a growth mindset leader, one thing that's important to pick up on is it doesn't mean that you're just the feel good rah-rah person all the time. In a lot of aspects, a growth minded leader actually challenges people around them more than a fixed person does, because they are identifying opportunities for growth. So they expect a lot. They have high expectations. They set the bar high. The difference is that they're pushing those people and inspiring them to achieve those results to get better, because they themselves want to get better too. So I don't know about you, but I'd much rather work for a growth leader than a fixed leader, right? So we are actually going to transition into a breakout session now, and you are automatically going to be broken out into groups. The magic of Zoom breakout rooms, if you haven't experienced it before, it's a little like internet magic. And so you're going to have a leader in each of your breakout sessions that's going to help you walk through some of these questions for conversation. So just as an overview for you to see, we're going to talk a little bit about what mindset attributes you feel you possess. How do you take or approach challenges? When you're faced with obstacles, what's your natural affinity or natural approach? How do you see effort? What do you do when you're given feedback or criticism? And how do you operate when you see other people succeed? I would encourage us, these are safe spaces for us to have these conversations in these breakout rooms. So let's be vulnerable. Let's share where we feel. If it's okay for us to say, I think most of us would probably align with a fixed mindset if we're really honest with ourselves. If you're growth, we can learn a ton from you. But let's be open and honest about where we are, because this is all about growing. And if we have that vulnerability with each other, I think it's going to help us understand how to develop. So we are going to break out. You'll also notice that all of these questions are listed in the chat box for your breakout session. And then we'll come back together and we'll debrief a little bit based on the conversations you had in the chat feature. So have fun. We'll be back in about 15 minutes. Okay, I think we've got everybody back. And if your group breakout conversation was anything like mine, it was just pure gold and what we were learning and sharing, and lots of openness and vulnerability, which I thought was awesome. So let's debrief a little bit, and maybe we'll have some people share in the chat. That's probably the easiest way to do this. But tell us, what was your experience like? What stories did you share? Hopefully it was helpful for you. What did you learn about your personal mindset? And did you identify any certain situations or environments which positively or negatively impact your mindset? Someone, it looks like Michelle is sharing a file, which is awesome. So thank you. And I have to just say, as we're seeing some comments come in, we had an amazing story share earlier as we were going through the content from Tiffany. I think it's Fakis, if I'm saying your last name correctly. Tiffany is experiencing, battling cancer, and had surgery on Monday and is here today. So Tiffany, thank you for being here. How awesome that you are just owning the growth mindset, even in the midst of a literal challenge that you're experiencing. And we are just so glad that you're here. Tell us, anything come out as you are going through your breakouts, and as we're waiting for anybody to share in the chat. Our group had a couple of really interesting observations. One of the things we talked about is that sometimes it's easy to perceive that other people around us who are confident that they automatically possess a growth mindset. And we discussed how that isn't always necessarily the case, that sometimes that can be the perception, but not the reality. So don't let that intimidate you. We also talked about the importance of one of the individuals in our group shared that she's taking on a new role in her job. And because of that, she's got a pretty steep learning curve. And so sometimes she can feel overwhelmed by the idea of all that she has to learn as she's growing into this role. And one of the things that came up in this discussion is the idea of the importance of people that are leaders in our organizations. If we ourselves are leaders, or other people within an organization are, that adopting the growth mindset as an individual is just one piece of the puzzle. Our organizations and leaders really have to make sure that they adopt that principle as well, because it doesn't really create an environment that feels safe to have a growth mindset if you're working for someone who doesn't have that growth mindset. Unfortunately, this person that shared is confident that that person does, but I just would encourage us and challenge us to think about the idea that if we're in a leadership position, giving some grace to the people that are on our teams in any capacity to adopt a growth mindset is really important for them to be successful in developing a growth mindset. We just had some great shares, great breakouts, so I'm really glad to hear. Nothing else too specific, but it looks like, oh, we've just got some LinkedIn shares. I love it. Awesome networking, ladies. All right, well, we'll keep moving on to the next breakout. Oh, Michelle did share something. We had a great conversation about owning jealousy and unapproachable senior leaders who see lack of knowledge as a fault, and how competition is a very good thing for growth and development. I love it. Yeah, that feeling of envy or jealousy, and turning it to be more growth related, or maybe even just checking yourself if that's the natural feeling that you have, jealousy or envy, maybe asking yourself and reflecting on why you feel that way and being able to turn that around. Love it, Michelle. Thank you for sharing. All right, we're going to keep the presentation going. So now I want to make sure that we spend some time talking about how we can move and shift into this idea of growth mindset. Whether you have it already or if it's a brand new concept to you, we all have the opportunity to develop and grow further in a growth mindset. So there are a few things that we can do in order to develop, and you'll see those three here, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail in the following slides. First and foremost, we have to recognize when we're in a fixed mindset. I think you may have, some of us may have identified or know the idea of like the rubber band moment, right? Have you ever heard of someone trying to break a habit and they wear a rubber band on their wrist, and anytime they go to reach for the cigarette or they go to reach for the extra donut, they pull the, or use a swear word, they pull the rubber band and do a little snap, right? That's kind of an extreme example, but the noticing of the fixed mindset is probably one of the more difficult pieces of this, especially if it's been ingrained in us and it's just sort of how we've naturally operated for the majority of our lives. So a big piece of this, if you walk away today, just being more aware and noticing. And then the other key component to that is noticing that you have that mindset and then shifting your perspective, right? So this is the idea of I can't versus I can't yet, or I don't know how yet, right? The next piece is really reframing our goals. I think it's very natural, and this also is a challenge as well. It's natural for us to identify and make goals for ourselves when we're trying to achieve something that usually is fixed on the outcome instead of on the process to get there. Let that sink in for a minute, right? Our natural process for developing and framing goals tends to be what's the outcome, not how we're going to get there. A growth mindset person really tracks and charts the goals along the way and celebrates successes on the improvement, not on the end result. It's a totally different concept for those of us who have been in a fixed mindset for a long time, but it is powerful and it's encouraging, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then focusing on your progress and making those mile markers along the way as you're seeing those go. So noticing the shift is the first piece we talked about. I'm not good at this yet, right? I'm not good at this. I don't think I can. This isn't easy for me. Noticing that you say those things and that that's your self-talk and shifting it to use the word yet. I think that's one of the most powerful things we can do as we think through this. The second piece, like we talked about a minute ago, reframing your goals. So instead of the goal being on, I want to make this many sales in my sales job this year, or I want to get an A on that test. Instead, reframing the goals that maybe that's the desired outcome, but the goal is how many hours are you going to study to feel like you can get an A on the test? Or how many phone calls are you going to make to new prospective clients to get the number of sales that you want to achieve? So the idea of developing and improving and growing and progress, all of these ideas, you're becoming this, and also that it's over time, right? We have to be realistic with ourselves that if we want to make an improvement somewhere and in some way and achieve a goal, it usually takes us time to get there. And then the last piece of this, as we started to talk about in the goals section, focus on your progress. Where were you 6 months ago compared to where you are now? Where do you want to be 6 months from now? I, as a consultant, spend a lot of time with my clients talking about having reflection stages within whatever process we're working through, whether it's identifying a new job or helping to identify the next hire that we're bringing on for a corporate client. It's always about the reflection of what did we learn? How can we use what we learned and how can we implement it to make it better moving forward? So this idea of reflection, I personally try at least quarterly. If I'm really good in a year, I'll do it monthly, have at least a half day for reflection where I go outside of my normal work environment and I reflect on the past month and figure out where I've progressed, what I've done better, and how I can improve and grow moving forward. And I think that's such a healthy thing to do, whether it's talking about work progress or school progress or personal relationship progress, right? All this applies to every facet of that. All right, so now we're going to go into breakout session number 2. And this is going to be more focused and tailored to how we can embrace the growth mindset more and what we can do to improve in that space. So questions to consider for yourself: how can you change the way you face challenges? How can you change the way you face obstacles? What can you do differently in the way you view effort and criticism or feedback? And how can you change the way you view other people's success? So I know we already started to get into some of this in our last conversations, but in general, what I think we're looking for here in breakout session 2 is what can we do to improve on our growth mindset and become better? And how can we embrace some of the challenges, obstacles, and feedback that we might get? So we are going to go ahead and break out again. I'll read some of the additional comments and we'll get back together for our debrief of breakout session number 2 in 15 minutes. Okay, we'll give everybody just a quick second to come back. Wait another 10 seconds or so. And while you're coming back, if there's anything you want to share about your breakout session, feel free to go ahead and type it in the chat box. We had some additional comments from people from the first one around, let me see here. We have choices. That was a big theme. We have choices and influencing the yet. Also, another one I saw is surrounding yourself with people who are also growth minded. That becomes, I think, really important. You know, like energy attracts like, right? So that was a really big one that came from room 3. So thanks for sharing there. We also had Cassandra share about another book that she read that was helpful to her. The book called The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes, which I think a few people have mentioned that they've read and was really helpful in creating that mindset shift. So as we're waiting to see if anybody has any comments, a couple of things that came up in the breakout group I was in, there was a lot of honesty around what prompts maybe your apprehension or you know, impacts your comfort level with wanting to be in more of a growth mindset. And a lot of it came down to not wanting to be perceived as not knowing. So I think one of the words that probably comes up a lot, if we think about it, is just the judgment of others or their perception of other people, either in what our skill set or ability is. And so I know I am definitely guilty of that. And so just trying to overcome the idea that there's probably a good chance that other people in the room don't know too. We actually had a real world example where someone in our group asked for clarification on a word we were using. And it was literally a live example in action of someone using the growth mindset, which was so cool. And someone else in the group identified it, which was just really neat. Also the idea that awareness creates improvement, right? And so being aware and really using that to catapult how we can improve. And then we also talked a little bit, a few people shared the idea of affirmations, going through challenging experiences and actually saying and speaking affirmations to themselves on a daily basis around who they are or what they are or their abilities, and setting themselves up in a good mindset. So that was great. We had a couple of other people share assuming no judgment when people give criticism or feedback. Excellent. I know we also had somebody else share that the idea of trying, if we are the people giving feedback, trying to frame that feedback in a way that is more constructive. So I think sometimes the word criticism just kind of makes us kind of bundle up a little bit. But the idea of constructive feedback or constructive criticism is sharing where someone can improve and not being only critical. So us, again, if you're in a leadership capacity, thinking about the way in which you give feedback to people might make them more open to taking it. Loving yourself first. I love Autumn shared. Group 3 again was sharing framing goals and discussions around what you do want to achieve versus what you don't. So speaking in the positive versus the negative. I love that. Thank you, Thias, for sharing. And then also talked about advice on how to get others to shift from their mindset across generations, especially as we're working in a workforce that is multi-generational and will continue that way. Some people in younger generations might adopt the mindset, growth mindset principle more quickly. And those that are in older generations might have to be taught, right? They've had a longer stint where they may not have been in a growth mindset. And so they might have to be taught and helped through that process. Great feedback. I love it. Other things just as we wrap up that I think are important to consider. Other little, quick tips and tricks: acknowledge and embrace your imperfections, right? This idea of vulnerability and that we're all flawed. We all have things that we can do to improve, and acknowledging and embracing those things. View challenges as opportunities, right? That shift from a challenge as an opportunity. Try different learning tactics. If you're recognizing that the learning tactic that you're using to grow in one area isn't working, try a different tactic. Replace the word failing with the word learning. I love that. I think, unfortunately, failing has such a negative connotation, and no one wants to be a failure or fail at something. So one of my favorite quotes that I heard years ago is, sometimes we win and sometimes we learn, right? There is no win or lose. There's winning or learning. And I think that's so applicable to anything that we do in life. Failing with the word learning. Stop seeking approval. It's not about approval of others. It's about your journey for growth. Value the process over the end result. We talked about setting goals based on progress, not on the end result. Celebrate the growth of other people when they do something well, right? Not only will they in turn support you, but you'll feel better instead of feeling envious or jealous of their success. Emphasize growth over speed, remembering that it takes time. Reward actions, not traits. Portray criticism as positive. So we talked about that feedback loop. Provide regular opportunities for reflection. Take a reflection day or a reflection half day. One of the individuals in our group said that she tries to do a reflection day, if she can, monthly, and she goes to the beach because it's a place where she can think and be clear-headed. Love that idea. Use the word yet, right? We talked about this several times over. Learn from other people's mistakes. And the biggest piece of this is ultimately taking ownership over your attitude. I saw it so many times, over and over and over again. The idea of choice, right? We have a choice in how we set our mindset. And it does take practice, but we do have a choice when we wake up every day of what kind of mindset we're going to be in. If you can give yourself the affirmation and the positive self-talk, and then the piece, remember, is not just believing it, but putting it into action and practicing it, you will be well on your way to a wonderful growth mindset, and you will encourage and motivate and inspire others around you to be growth-minded as well. It was such a pleasure to be with you all today. I thank you so much for your time. I would welcome the opportunity. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, all the social media channels. Find me, Instagram, Erin R. Carlson, and LinkedIn is just Erin Ritchie Carlson. Let's connect. Tell me how you're using the growth mindset, how you're getting better. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. It's been a pleasure today.
Yes, and before we sign off, Erin, thank you so much. I mean, thank each of you for being here, but Erin especially for generously giving your time. So we look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn and Instagram and sharing our success stories. So please do that. I know Thais had the chance to share a little bit about Women United at the kickoff of this session, and I am blessed to have the opportunity to be one of the co-chairs of our advisory board for Women United. So anybody who wants to learn more, feel free to reach out to either me directly or any of us with the Rainbows, and we'll be excited to tell you about what we do as a group of women leaders here in our community, sharing our time, talent, and treasure to help drive important conversations and around these types of community issues and lots of other different things that we do. In fact, a couple of highlights. On January 29th, we're going to be having our Advocacy in Action session. February 17th, we're going to be continuing our statewide speaker series. We kicked that off back in, I think, October, and so session 2 will be in February. We're going to have a book club in March, so just lots of opportunities. We're out of time to share some of the details, but stay tuned. If you guys hopefully will fill out the survey that that you'll be, I think it's going to be in the group chat. If it isn't already, I think Amanda just popped it in there. We'd really appreciate if you give us your feedback for today's session. This is just one of many things that we do to try to connect women leaders and drive important conversations in our community. So we appreciate each of you being here. Please provide your feedback. And if we have your contact information, which we do, we'll be sharing more information about other events and ways for you to get engaged. So thank you, everybody. And I want to keep us on time, but I know a few of us will stay a little bit later to answer questions or to wrap up any conversations. Be sure to copy the group chat if you want to save any of those recommendations that came along the way. And just thank each of you for taking your Friday morning to be a part of this important conversation and share your time with us.